Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, A Page in My Diary. I'm Paige, PMC, Peace Move, whatever you want to call me, it will do. You already know what it is. So you guys, I am making a video after a month and I realized that I've been pretty consistent with posting once a month. I genuinely would like to get to the point where I'm at least making a video like twice a month. I aspire to be like the YouTubers who are out here making videos multiple times out of the month, let alone multiple times out of the week. That takes a consistency level that I'm not yet at, but I'm giving myself grace for simply making a video. This is a video that I genuinely have been going back and forth with in regards to if I post it or do I not post it. And it's been like a ping pong game in my head to see if I'm going to do it or not. With those two questions, I've been trying to figure out like why am I hitting this wall when it comes to posting this and talking about this topic. The topic that I want to talk about is in regards to domestic violence. I think the main reason that I'm hitting this wall is because there's a lot of shame that comes with admitting that you've been in a toxic relationship and have, you know, just gone through the journey of that. If you're somebody who is in a situation that's toxic with a romantic partner, even if you're not, you know, officially together or not, if you're someone who's in a domestic violence situation, I feel like my heart 100% goes out to you, because I now realize how difficult it is to, one, get out of that situation, let alone to be able to admit that you're even in one. I feel like it took me really until I was in the process of getting out of the relationship for me to realize that I was indeed in a toxic and abusive, emotionally and physically abusive relationship with my ex-fiance. And it is still something that I am trying to get a hold of and like process right now to this day. It's fairly new, me being out of the relationship. I transitioned out of that abruptly at the beginning of this year. So to say that we have one more month of 2022 is wild to me, because when I think about where I was December of last year, let alone January of this year, it's honestly night and day. And it's honestly mind-blowing how quickly I feel like I've been able to transform myself and get my energy together, because to be honest, the last 2 years, I have had a very hard time being able to recognize myself. And I feel like I completely lost myself in the relationship that I was in for the past 2 years. I just started therapy like a month and a half ago. I've done a boatload of therapy. I'm the queen of therapy. I'm someone who's constantly just trying to like push people to go to therapy. Even if you feel like, oh, I have nothing going on in my life, everything is peaches and cream, I don't need to see a therapist, I'm good, I have control over my beautiful mind. You know, kudos to you, but you know, I feel like even if everything is kind of going steady in your life, I still feel like having a therapist, even if you're seeing that therapist like once a month, I think it's so important to be able to have an outside resource to kind of lean on that is not involved in your everyday world, meaning, you know, not a part of your work life, not a part of your friendship group, not a part of your like familial lifestyle with your family and stuff like that. I think it's so important to be able to have that guidance and have that sound voice that is not a voice in your everyday world. It is so important. If something's going wrong with our body, if we're having a pain in our body, we're going to go see a doctor. You know, we see a dentist every year. Whatever the case is, you go see a doctor and you don't think twice about it. But it's like, why is there such a stigma when it comes to needing to check on the brain? This is the thing that gets us up. This is the thing that helps us be able to like navigate in all aspects of our life. So I'm a huge advocate for seeing a therapist. I've done individual therapy, I've done group therapy. In my previous relationship, I did 2 rounds of couples therapy that didn't end up working, but you know what? I've experienced it, and I've been an inpatient and outpatient. So I am well informed when it comes to therapy. And if you're someone who doesn't have like insurance, because let's not, be naive here. If you live in the US, therapy is not cheap. It's not free. And I feel like a lot of the times that's like a main thing that stops people from even pursuing like seeing a therapist, because of like the cost. You know what I mean? It costs me like $90 per session to see my therapist, and I'm going through insurance, which is so crazy to me. Like, that's not cheap at all. And if you're someone who like can't afford that, like that would turn you off. But I've learned in all of my experiences with being in therapy, I've found a lot of different resources, to like a lot of different nonprofit organizations that provide individual therapy, that also provide group therapy. I feel like group therapy is something that honestly changed my life, and it was I feel like the most seen I've ever felt when it comes to being in therapy, because I was able to share my story, but then also sharing that space and like being educated through the therapist, I was also able to hear other people's stories that was very similar to my situation. It was just, different names attached to the situation that they were in as well. I'm saying all this, I'm rambling. I have been going back and forth when it comes to posting this video. But I realized that October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and I had every intention all of October to make a video sharing my story. And I ended up in October like recording a video like 3 times, and I just wasn't vibing with it. And each time I psyched myself out and never ended up posting it. And I've recorded this, I've probably been trying to record this for the past like hour and a half, and every single time I start writing, recording it and talking, I'm just not liking how I sound or what it is that I'm saying. So I've been stopping, and I'm really hoping by the time I'm done talking, I can get to the point of actually recording the video and posting it in its completion. My dogs, they're so loud. Give me a moment. I will be back. Okay, my dogs stopped barking. And when I say dogs, I'm talking about Elmo. Okay, so what I was saying, I was talking about therapy. Yeah, huge advocate for therapy. With my new therapist that I started about a month and a half ago, I had a question about what I just said. Like, I am really trying to figure out why I was having such a difficult time feeling comfortable sharing my experience with domestic violence. And I was talking about that in my last session. And, I feel like I am really just trying to get to this point where I just give myself grace and allow myself to process things as I process them, and also remind myself that there's no rush to talk about anything if I'm not ready yet, and knowing that that's okay. But I feel like I am ready to talk about it. The people that are in my life do know about like what has been going on, but I am someone, when it comes to like this channel and like through my writing, I know I'm someone who is completely transparent, and I didn't want to not share what I've been going through since the beginning of this year, since I moved back. I lived in Los Angeles for the past 8 years, and I just moved back to my hometown in Pennsylvania in February. And that's like a long time. It's been a long time since I honestly haven't lived back home since I graduated high school. And when I, got out of high school, I was living in New York. And then right after New York, I lived in LA for like 8 years. So it's been quite some time since I've been back home in Pennsylvania. And I, for the longest time, have been very resistant when it comes to moving back home. But I think in the grand scheme of things, I think energetically, it was always aligned for me to come back to my roots and come back to my safe haven, which is Pennsylvania. You know, the majority of my close friends are here, my family is here, and I think it was just always a part of my story to come back here before transitioning into my next chapter in my life. Hopefully next year around this time, or yeah, honestly around this time, fall, winter of next year, I am manifesting that I'll be in Atlanta, Georgia. I have some family that lives in Georgia, but I'm pursuing acting. I want to be able to audition in Atlanta, and then also I'm working on my real estate license as well for Georgia. So I am putting out all my energy in good faith that I will be in my own space again in you know, this time next year. But so I want to share what it is that I was going through for the last 2 years. The story is very wild in regards to how I got out of my toxic relationship. I think most toxic relationships, especially people that I know who have been or are in toxic relationships, one thing that is very similar that I'm noticing is that the beginning of the relationship seems like the most magical experience ever. And that's exactly what I went through. I feel like it was a whirlwind. I got into the relationship very quickly and things just started moving very, very fast. And I was dealing with a partner, my ex-partner, who just made it very hard to say no, but she was also very good at blinding me with, I guess, beautiful things, materialistic things, and it made it hard to ignore everything that was going on in the day-to-day in our day-to-day life. And you know, so the relationship started in 2020, which was around the time of the pandemic, and like the start of the pandemic. I was still living in Los Angeles. She lived like an hour and a half away, and I wasn't working at the time because my job closed down because of the pandemic. With that, like, I was fearful that I was gonna have to move back home before I wanted to actually move back home. I was very resistant at the time at the idea of coming back to Pennsylvania, and I was in this new relationship. I didn't want to move, so I was like, I'm just gonna keep my apartment in LA, and I'm gonna just essentially just spend the majority of my time with my girlfriend at the time. So it just kind of like, with that transitioned into me just, you know, we would, you know, stay at my apartment sometimes, but it then kind of transitioned, like a lot of my time was spent at her place, and essentially it was like we were living with each other, and I was only going back to my place really to just refresh my clothes and stuff like that and get a new set of clothes to bring with me to her place. And you know, now that I'm not in that situation, I see how fast paced that is. I'm in a new relationship right now, and I'm almost like overwhelmed at how calm and slow pace the relationship is unfolding, because it's not what I was used to. It's not what I'm used to with what I was going through with my ex. Everything was like boom, 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 boom. Like, let's check every single box off to say that we've completed it in a very short, condensed amount of time. And, you know, now being in a relationship where things are moving at a healthy pace, I do have moments where I feel overwhelmed, because it's like, I'm like, am I missing something? Should I be, you know, should we be somewhere else already? And the answer is no, we're exactly where we're supposed to be at this time. And, you know, I appreciate my new relationship so much with my boyfriend, because he's just making me realize that love doesn't need to be chaotic. And I'm someone, especially with all of the trauma that I've experienced, I'm someone who just, I'm not even going to lie. Like, I feel like since I've experienced trauma, I experienced my first bit of trauma at 13. I feel like I've always been someone who is that has gravitated towards some sort of chaos. And this is the first time in my life, I feel like at 28 years old, where I feel super grounded in my energy. Is there a lot of like big questions I have with myself in regards to my future, to say like, Where am I going to be? Am I going to get there? Yes. But I feel like I would rather deal with those. I feel like I can manage that than chaotic energy, like the stress of like constantly being in fight or flight mode at all times. Being in a safe relationship is the only energy that I'm gravitating towards. That's not what was going on. So, you know, I was essentially living with my ex very, very early on. I just started to see like a level of comfortability shift away, a level of comfortability sinking in, and a mask that was on shifting away, and it was no longer in place. And what I went into the relationship thinking, it just was not. And with that, I'm sure if you're someone who has experienced or is in a toxic situation, it's really hard to just get a grasp on the reality of that, and like accepting that the person that you're with is actually not who you thought they were. And I'm pansexual. I was in a relationship with a woman. I was also dealing with being in a relationship with someone who did not have the best relationship with their family when it comes to accepting their sexuality in its entirety, versus, you know, I have my family, my friends are in full support of who I am. And the contrast in that can be very damaging to one's mental health if they are constantly trying to feel seen by the people that should accept them. And I think that was like very difficult to, so many burps. I think that was very difficult for my ex to witness, like throughout the 2 years that we were together, the support that I got from my family and the lack of support that she got from hers. You know, fast forward through a year, year and a half, 2 years. We didn't make it to 2 years. It was right before the 2-year mark when everything kind of like came crumbling down. Right towards the year mark, my ex proposed to me and we were engaged. Just even when I think back to the proposal, when you think about getting proposed to, if you are someone who wants to be engaged and have a life partner, like through marriage and stuff like that, that's something that I still want in this life. You know, I do want to experience it again. If you're someone like me, since I was a little girl, I felt like, oh, when I get proposed to, it's going to be this magical thing. I think about when I got proposed to, like my ex was, I found out later on that night that my ex was like low key, like really tipsy the day that she proposed to me. And then after the proposal happened, a huge fight broke out, and it just wasn't what it was. It wasn't what I was putting out when I shared that moment and how people saw the moment on the, from an outsider's perspective. I feel like I just started ignoring all of the red flags. There were so many red flags that were being waved in my face that I was just having a hard time seeing. I was just existing in this very, very intense fog that was just blinding my reality. And it got to the point when like we couldn't go a day, or we couldn't really go a week without fighting, let alone sometimes like a day, like without having some sort of like chaotic mess happen. And towards the end of the relationship, it got to the point where we were having such frequent fights that it was just so toxic. Excuse me guys, I'm gonna get water because I'm dying. Had a tickle in my throat. Yeah, so we were having fights that were just, they were just very violent fights, and it was not good. I want to say around this time last year is when we had our first physical altercation, and something that I grew up learning from my mom. If you're ever in a relationship with someone and they put their hands on you once, it's just a matter of time when they're going to put their hands on you again. And that is exactly what ended up happening. I was completely shocked when we got into our first physical altercation. We were in San Francisco, and it happened at the San Francisco airport, where we were dropping off our rental car to come back to LA, to come back to our place. The entire fight started over like a missing parking pass, and me being blamed for not being able to find this missing parking pass. And the entire drive from this parking lot that we were in, driving back to the airport, which was about like a 25-30 minute drive, like I was secretly recording the argument. If you are in a relationship and it's toxic, and you have gotten to the point where you started collecting essentially evidence against your partner, like that is a major red flag that I was ignoring and that you should not ignore. And I had like just a collection of like recordings of fights that we were having for myself. At the time, I didn't really know what I was gonna do with the recordings, but it ended up helping me in the long run, which I'll talk about towards the end of this video. When we were driving those 30 minutes back to the airport, I was getting berated and yelled at and screamed at for, making us run late to dropping off the car. We had a few hours before our actual flight needed to take off to San Francisco, but it was a huge fight. Yeah, like the recording that I had like led into the physical altercation, and then the recording stopped, and pretty much I got left at the parking lot in the parking garage where we had to leave the car, and I ended up getting left in San Francisco. And thankfully, I was completely distraught. And when I finally was able to get myself to the airport where I was going to check in my bag, I was completely late. Like I was not going to make my flight or anything like that. And the person who was checking my bag saw how how much I was in distress, and they gave me a hotel for me to stay in overnight, and I was able to take it like the next flight. As all of this is going on, like my ex is, I'm getting a bunch of text messages. We're fighting back and forth via text message. She's wondering where I'm at, like why am I not with her on the plane or anything like that. Just so much stuff is going on. And then I had text messages that when she finally landed in LA, I had text messages where she was talking about the threats, like that she was gonna hurt herself. She was gonna hurt herself in front of my dogs and take a video of her doing it. All of these things that she was saying to me via text that I ended up saving. And still, when I got back to LA and I finally landed, and my family was aware of us getting in a physical altercation, I still ended up going back to the relationship and was like, oh, like we're just gonna postpone the wedding. We're not gonna get, we're gonna postpone it, and we're gonna work on it, and we're gonna get past this. And still existing in this fog. And I ended up going after the physical altercation. I ended up coming home for about 2.5 weeks to ground myself, because it was the first time I've ever experienced anything like that. And I'm so glad that I did. I didn't really speak with my ex that much while I was home for those 2 weeks. I really just allowed myself to surround myself with my friends and my family. I had a lot of hard conversations with my parents, my brother, my best friends, with how toxic this whole thing had gotten, and it's just not looking good. And I needed to like really pay attention and get myself out of this situation. But still, I was at this place where I was not ready to accept the reality of the truth that was in front of me. And I ended up going back, and I was like, we're gonna try one more time. I'm gonna set boundaries, and I'm gonna set consequences that, if these boundaries are crossed, these are what the consequences are gonna be. When you're dealing with a narcissist, and when you're dealing with someone who is not seeing anything other than their way, it's very hard to effectively try to move forward in a healthy way and to transition out of toxicity. Like, it is what it is. It's just, it's just not meant to happen. It's not meant to be. I ended up going back to LA. At this point, we were actually living together. A week didn't even go by before we were like back at it, fighting really bad with each other again. And at this point, it is like it's January, so it's the beginning of this year. January of 2022, I had one weekend where I had already had a flight booked for me to come home over the weekend to spend time with my friends. And it was during this trip that I had made the decision, after spending time with my family and spending a lot of time with my friends and just really just being honest with myself finally, to admit that I just have not been happy for the past 2 years. And I've been lying to myself and I've been lying to everyone that I love that I'm happy and that I want to move forward in this engagement and all of these things. And I just wanted the support to transition out of this relationship. And I knew that it wasn't going to be easy. And I felt like I just like couldn't lie to myself anymore. And, you know, I was getting a lot of advice in regards to like, you need to make a plan when it comes to getting out of this relationship. And for me, something that I experienced a lot with my ex was me being love bombed all the time. It was like, as soon as I started to pull my energy back or disconnect in a way, I feel like the narcissistic behavior in my ex like recognize that, and as I would pull back, I would get love bombed by getting, you know, a bunch of gifts or just being love bombed, like trying to get me to not want to shift my energy out of being with her. That's exactly what happened. As soon as I got off the plane after making the decision that I wanted to leave, I had a bunch of flowers waiting for me. I had a bunch of gifts that she gave me, and it was just, I mean, the decision had already been made. I was on the plane. I wrote a very long letter to her, letting her know that I didn't want to be in this relationship anymore. I planned on that following day, we had therapy, and I planned on reading the note in therapy. Like I was saying, like I had advice in regards to how to get out of the relationship and like be strategic with a plan, but I feel like when you're someone who's like existing in a toxic situation, sometimes it's not as easy as that. Like I feel like on paper, it can sound great to like follow a step-by-step guide to get yourself out. But I was at the point where I was so checked out that I couldn't lie to myself, and I couldn't handle the love bombing because I was way past the point of being blinded by what was happening to me. And the following day, I saw my spirit guide. Anyone who's in my life knows how important the psychic that I met in my time being in LA. I love her so much. I have had so many great sessions and experiences with her. And before I had this therapy session with my ex, I saw my psychic, and my psychic literally said everything. One, that the relationship was done, that I was done, I was going to be breaking up with her. And she said, you know, she always talks about how she's not connected to right or wrong, any outcomes, and she just sees what she sees in the downloads that she's given. But she had essentially told me, you know, this is not going to be a pretty breakup, and it's going to be something that is hectic. And she was like, it's not going to be easy. And I had that session at like 5 p.m. Therapy was at 7 p.m. and I broke up with her in therapy. And in therapy, again, I was secretly recording how this breakup was going to be on my phone. I didn't know why I was recording it, but I did record it. I recorded just the aftermath of me breaking up with her in therapy. And in this therapy session, she walked away and like essentially just lost it. And the therapy is, you know, is hearing everything on my end on what is going on. I'm dealing with my ex screaming. She's throwing herself into the wall. She's making herself throw up, and she's just losing her mind because I'm breaking up with her. And my therapist was very concerned for my safety, and I had already told my family that I had broken up with my ex. My mom was already looking at flights to figure out how she can get to LA to be with me, and I already had a hotel for me to go with Elmo and Vita, my 2 dogs. And I knew that was going to be the biggest thing that I had to deal with, was my ex having something to say about her not being able to take the dogs. And another thing that I didn't say, this is like a little tidbit that I don't want to get too much into it, but this is just a little tidbit that actually ended up saving my life. I'm a huge manifester, especially during the new moons. If you're someone who is into new moons and manifesting, it's a huge time to set your intentions on what you want to bring into your life. And before I broke up with my ex, I decided, I don't know what new moon it was, but it was a new moon, and I had talking to my ancestors, my spirit guides, and when I manifest, I channel write, I journal, and I was asking for abundance. And when I manifest, I write as if I have already been received the whatever it is I'm asking for, or whatever it is that I'm calling into my life. And I had written to Spirit, I was like, dear Spirit, thank you so much for this random abundance that you're providing me. Since you provided this to me, I'm in a much better place, yada, yada, yada. It's giving me everything I need. It was a whole thing. It was like 2-3 pages on what I wrote. And a week later, when I wrote this, after I wrote this, this letter to Spirit during the new moon, I was going to dinner with my ex. We were about to cross the street to go to the restaurant, and it's like close to 10 p.m. and something told me before we crossed the street I needed to turn around and look on the ground. And I turned around, I walked back, and nobody else is on the street with us. And I look down and I find a wad of cash. And when I pick it up, I'm like super stressed because I felt like I was being punked. And I literally found, individually banded in thousands, I found $10,600. I kid you not. Anyone that's in my life knows this. Like, I literally found $10,600. And now that I'm not in this situation anymore, I understand that was my spirit guides literally handing me what I asked for, and it ended up being my escape money out of this relationship. And it's absolutely wild. And I knew when I broke up with her that the biggest thing that was going to be thrown in my face is that money and the dogs. Elmo, I've had Elmo for 6 years, and he's 6 years old, and Vita now is 2 years old. And I specifically found Vita for Elmo because I've known for a very long time, since Elmo was like 2 or 3, that he needed a playmate because he's so wild and he needs someone to bounce that energy off, which is why I found Vita. And I ended up finding Vita. Everything with Elmo and Vita is all my name, all their paperwork, all of their vet information, any emergency visits to the vet, everything is in my name. They're my dogs. But I knew that was going to be the biggest thing that was thrown in my face. And after that ended up happening, me breaking up with her in therapy, that was the number one thing that was being thrown in my face. After I got off the phone with the therapist, a huge, like the biggest fight that we had ever gotten into exploded and unraveled, and it turned into an absolute nightmare. Yeah, it turned into another physical altercation. I had to protect myself. She was fighting me. I got my hair ripped out. My glasses got broken. She was fighting me, pushing me against the bookshelf in my apartment. I had Vita in my hand. Vita was getting shoved into the bookshelf. It was a whole thing, and all I was trying to do, like, I didn't care about getting any of my stuff. All I wanted to do was get the dogs out, because I had a hotel. Remember I said that? I had a hotel already set up for me, and I just wanted to get into the hotel, and once my mom landed in LA, I would worry about getting all of my stuff and worrying about that later. And it was just she was not letting me leave the apartment at all. And so I ended up taking my dogs in the bathroom, and I locked myself in the bathroom, and my therapist called me and wanted to check in with me after I had gotten off the phone with her to see if anything had de-escalated, and it clearly didn't. And I told her that I was locked in the bathroom and she wasn't letting me leave the apartment. And I had called 911. I'm Black, and now that I'm not in this situation, I probably would not have done this, because what do cops ever do to protect Black people, number one, and let alone people who are dealing with domestic abuse issues, sexual abuse issues. Like I reported my sexual assault when I was 19. I had to go into the cops to report it. It was extremely traumatizing. They did not care, and that was like the first experience that I had with cops where I didn't feel like my story mattered or anything like that. And this is the second time I had the same sort of experience, but like worse. I end up calling the cops, letting them know, hey, I'm locked in the bathroom. I just got into a physical altercation with my fiance, and I'm just trying to leave. I already have a hotel set up for me, and I'm just trying to leave with my dogs, and she's not letting me leave. My family called from Pennsylvania. They had a dispatch call to the cops in LA, letting them know that the same thing, she broke up with her in therapy. She's not letting her leave. It's a hectic situation. This is what's going on. So, in my mind, with me calling the cops from the bathroom, locked in the bathroom, that my story was being understood, and I was going to be heard whenever the cops did arrive. But when the cops arrived, at first it was two cops at first, both Hispanic, and my ex was Hispanic as well. I don't know anyone, if you've heard about LAPD, and after me living in LA, I see how toxic LAPD is. I genuinely don't have a lot of respect for LAPD. I don't really have respect for the police in general at all. But after experiencing what I did, I felt like I was racially profiled, and that's exactly what happened. The cops, I felt like, even when I gave my sexual assault report in New York about what happened to me, there's like no concern about there's no concern towards the person that is sharing their story. And I feel like the only concern is getting the facts down so they can write it on a piece of paper and they can move forward and be on with their night or be on with their day. And I was dealing with, both cops were getting our information, our story, our side of the story. And at the time before the cops came, I had, I'd taken my money, and I had the dogs as well. And I had contacted two of my friends to come so they can take the dogs and like let the dogs stay with them, because I didn't want anything to happen with the dogs, because I knew that my mom was going to be in LA into the next day. And I ended up talking to the cops. I'm hyperventilating. I'm having a full-blown panic attack, trying to explain like what happened. And I'm like, my energy is like past 100. Like I'm completely like dissociated. I'm not okay at all. And I was just being asked rapid fire questions. There was never any chance for me to just have a moment of pause so I can ground myself. And they were just more concerned of figuring out what happened, and that was it. And so once they got her story, they got my story, they couldn't decide what to do. And I had made it clear that I already was on my way out and I wasn't able to leave. They said that they needed to call a third cop. They needed to call their boss. So a third cop comes, also Hispanic. When this third cop comes, he wants to know what's going on. He wants to know my side of the story. And as I'm sharing my story, I'm looking at him, trying to like give him the respect of the fact that he's a cop or whatever, and I am sharing my story. He's not looking me in the eye, and he's just kind of like, okay, like what actually happened type of energy, trying to rush me through the process of saying the story and stuff like that. And as soon as I finished, and he was like, okay, well, this is the decision that's going to happen. Because of the fact that my ex had marks on her neck because she was fighting me. She was fighting me while I had the dogs on, and I was defending myself. Because she had marks, I ended up being the one that got arrested. My ex ended up ripping my hair out, and she hid my hair that she ripped out in the trash can once the cops came. And she broke my glasses. They didn't take that into consideration. I feel like I'm a dark-skinned woman. It takes a lot for me to like show any sort of bruises or anything like that. But essentially I got arrested because of that fact. So I'm freaking out and I'm being taken to jail. And I am just so scared for my life because I'm a Black female. I'm thinking of Sandra Bland. I'm thinking I'm going to die. I'm either going to die in this cop car. I'm going to die when I get to jail and they're going to try to cover it up. Like, that's the only thing that I was thinking. And I was so scared. And when I get to jail and they do the whole processing of everything, I get there and I'm in a waiting cell or whatever with another female that is in jail for a domestic dispute as well. And she was Hispanic. And I'm asking her, you know, she's telling me her story, what happened to her and her husband. She had a kid involved. And I'm asking her, what did they set your bail for? Oh, they just set my bail for like $3,000. I'm like, what? $3,000? They set my bail when I was the one who called the cops, when I had my family call the cops from Pennsylvania. They set and when the cops came, I'm locked in the bathroom with my dogs. They set my bail for $50,000. Like, even when I say that out loud, I'm still flabbergasted because it just shows how twisted the system is and how they do not want Black people to get out of jail or be able to find a way out. Like, it's just, they want us to be stuck there. Like, and I am forever grateful for my family for being able to get me out, because if I didn't have that support, I would still be in LA in jail. Like, and thank God for the lawyer that I ended up having. I got out, my mom came, I got my dogs and everything like that. They released my dogs to me because the cops released the dogs to my friends because all of the paperwork was in my name. But my ex was being malicious afterwards and decided to create a restraining order on me to essentially say that she deserves to have the dogs, and the money that I found was like, in the report that she wrote, she was saying that from the first physical altercation that we got in, she was just lying on this police report. She was lying, saying she had a dislocated shoulder, that like all of these things, and not realizing that I had like evidence against her that I was secretly keeping. I had evidence from like the physical altercation that we had in the airport where like I had a busted lip, you know, I had scratches on my face and everything like that, that I had pictures of, that I had sent my parents, that they saved. And long story short, not really long story short, because this is pretty much a long video, all of the evidence that I had on her ended up working in my favor. I had an amazing lawyer. The lawyer ended up taking all of the recordings I had on her, the text messages of threats of her trying to say she was going to kill herself and do it in front of the dogs, take a video, all of the pictures that I had of myself from the abuse. Yeah, and I had like a letter from my therapist. I had all of these things that ended up working in my favor, that we were able to show the DA in LA, and they dropped everything. I didn't end up getting charged with anything. And yeah, they were also trying to charge me with a felony. Like the cops wanted me to just be in jail forever, I feel like. And it didn't work because of the lawyer. And also I had so much evidence just proving that that is not the case. And that's not what ended up happening. And that is what was going on with me January of 2022. And everything didn't get dismissed until like April or May of this year, and I'm extremely blessed. I just need to take a deep breath because it's a lot. It's a lot to even talk through. I feel like I was all over the place, and I'm going to listen back to this to even see if I'm going to post it. This is as far as I've ever gotten with the other videos that I tried making when it comes to talking about what happened to me with my ex and what's been going on with me. It's a lot to process, and for me it's very embarrassing to even think about think about me being in that predicament, and I'm still very much trying to get a grasp on why I was put in that situation. And I try not to get stuck in the loop of like, why did this happen to me, like why me, like woe is me type of thing, but really just understanding I feel like everything serves a higher purpose, even if even if you're unable to see the why or see the light at the end of the tunnel. I think everything happened for a reason, even though it was like super chaotic. I feel like if I did not go through that, I wouldn't be where I am right now, in a place of feeling so much more mentally grounded within myself and genuinely feeling so much more happy. And that's all I wanted at that time. Like when I came to the decision that I wanted to walk away from that toxic situation, was to just get to a place of feeling happy. And that's what I was trying to communicate to my ex-fiance at that time, was I'm just no longer happy. If you're in a situation where you're still with a toxic abuser and you're communicating to them that you're not happy, and they do things like to beg you to see it any other way, like don't allow anyone to ever convince you that you actually are happy if you're not. If your intuition is telling you that you're not happy, always listen to your intuition, always listen to that gut feeling, because I'm such an intuitive person, and I no longer want to deny that ability that I have to be intuitive within myself and with others. And I feel like I lost that when I was existing in the fog that I've been talking about, just of ignoring that little voice in the back of my head that was telling me, Paige, get out, like you're not happy. Pay attention to what your family's saying, pay attention to what your friends are saying. If you have that voice in your head that is telling you that I'm not happy, don't lie to yourself. And I feel like it's so much better to go through like the vortex of chaos, of like going through the process of getting out of a toxic situation and allowing yourself to see yourself on the other side and seeing what that new reality looks like, because I promise you it will provide something that I'm sure you're not even aware exists when you're still existing in chaotic energy. I hope you listen to all of this. I hope you listen to me ramble. I'm proud of myself for getting on here and talking about this, because has not been easy. It's been very difficult, and I hope you find, if you're someone who is struggling with this, I hope you can find a part of yourself. If you're someone who has experienced this or is experiencing this, I hope you can take a moment for yourself to reflect and understand that your happiness is everything, and your worth is beyond any words, and you should always lean into yourself before anyone else. And yes, that is what I've been having a hard time saying for the past month. So thank you for listening. I am going to wrap this video up. My dogs have been barking, losing their mind. I feel Like my armpits are leaking because I've just been very hot right now in the sweater. Talking about this makes me like clammy and anxious, and I want to go cuddle my dogs right now because talking about this makes me feel so many feelings. So I'm gonna head out. I love you guys and thank you for listening to me.